Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode, another CAJ, Coaching Agile Journeys. I think we're in the 5th year of this fully remote meetup, and you're very welcome. I'm really looking forward to Chris's workshop or talk. I think it's a workshop probably. Humans aren't resources. It's a thing that you talk about. It's a thing that I've talked about over the years with folks. People are people, not resources, but are they? We're going to have a debate about that tonight, and I'm sure Chris has got some really interesting visual stuff to work through with us tonight, and I can't wait. And let's have a real deep debate about that. I just want to point you at the Coaching Agile Journeys website, coachingagilejourneys.com. We've got a couple of lean coffees coming up on the 9th of August and the 20th of September. We also have another event, another meetup coming on the 23rd of August. Myself and Nims are going to be talking about contracting, agile contracting, and contracting for change. It's not up on the site. We'll put it up on the site, and it's going to be a mashup of transactional analysis and agile, and about what gives you the right to act within the organization, and what gives you the rights, and do you have the rights, and what rights are those rights? So yeah, agile contracting and ethics is coming up on the 23rd, but I'm going to pass over to Chris. Chris is his workshop, Humans Aren't Resources, Change My Mind. Chris is an agile coach, but he's the virtual agile coach as well. You may have seen him on LinkedIn and with all his amazing retrospectives. But yeah, over to you, Chris. People aren't resources. Change my mind.
Thank you, John. So hello there, folks. As mentioned, Chris Stone, the virtual agile coach. You've probably seen me. I tend to be a bit of everywhere. If you haven't listened details as to how you can pick me later. But yes, enterprise agile coach is what I do, and I'm very much a people-focused agile coach. And what I mean by that is, from an agile coaching perspective, I remember having a great conversation with someone recently, and they described themselves as a full stack coach. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, I kind of do a bit of everything, a bit of technical coaching, a bit of agile coaching, a bit of people-focused stuff. And I thought, well, actually, if you're a full stack coach, I'm definitely more of a people-focused coach. For me, what that means is I aim to systemically create an environment where people can be their most productive selves on their best days and be supported on their worst days. And to essentially provide them the autonomy and empowerment to do what they do best, to help reduce all those noise and distractions that just get in their way. Now, the first thing to admit about this is I've been guilty of doing this myself. The whole thing I'm about to speak to you about tonight, calling people resources, I've done it. I'm a bad person. I grew up where I began my career in the traditional project management Gantt chart style world, where I had all these delivery pressures about time and cost and schedule. And I absolutely had to pay attention to my resource profile. And I've definitely been guilty of treating people as if they were a resource and not a human. So I've learned my lesson. I've been there. I've done that. Just a reminder, I've shared a couple of links on the Zoom chat. So anyone who's joined a little bit late, I've just pasted them again there. There is a Miro board. And John, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, I'm going to just navigate around Miro and you guys can follow along. So where you should be right now is here. This People Aren't Resources, Change My Mind. It's called that for a reason. This is a live participative debate, discussion. I've never been someone who just wants to talk at people. So at various points throughout this, I will ask you guys questions. I will get you to engage with me, discuss with me. You know, if you disagree, tell me, we can talk it through. How has the word resources made it into the business language? Well, it's just one of those buzzwords, isn't it? It's one of those things. Like there's a poem here. Reach out to me. You'll find my calendar is up to date. Let's get together and move the needle, although I have a hard stop at 8. Drill down with me, drill down. Under the spreadsheet, we shall dive. Once there, we can sample low-hanging fruits whilst we innovate and synergize. Align with me, align, and explore the many moving parts. It's fine to think outside the box if we capture it all on your flip charts. Deploy with me, deploy those assets, which are quite considerable. So let's leverage them along the way as we focus on our core deliverable. It's one of those words, human resources, that's just made it into business language. It is acceptable. It's just something we use. We've grown up with it. It's deeply and heavily entrenched. Now, I've told you guys a little bit about me, what I want to do before we start is just set the context for a bit of participation. So I've shared a link to a Menti, and I'd like you guys, you folks, to answer a few questions there. So you'll be asked, what one word did you feel when you heard my opening statement about humans not being resources? That's the first question. You'll then be asked how many years of experience you have, what industry you currently work in, and your job title. And then you will be empowered to choose the direction that this debate flows in terms of the topics and areas we focus on. So this Menti should be presentation audience led, so you are able to just answer the questions and move on to the next one. Do feel free to start doing those. I'm going to, in a few moments, I'm going to let's give it a couple of minutes to allow people to answer these questions. I'm going to then paste images sharing the answers to some of these questions, so you can all see those and see where we've landed. Just for awareness, in terms of the one word people felt when they heard my opening statement, we've got a mixture of things. We've got people agreeing. Someone said they felt diminishing. Someone said, of course, completely true. It depends, a classic Agile coach phrase. It depends. Supportive, feeling guilty when they heard that. So there's a range of things coming through here. Someone said objects. So 14 responses so far. In terms of years of experience, the majority of people are on the 15 years plus. We've got a very, very experienced audience today. Again, I'll share the images of how this looks in a moment. Industries, we've got gambling, media entertainment, software, charity, higher education, cybersec, media. And job titles, head of delivery, agile coaches, scrum master, head of product. So yeah, a range of people represented here today. So I'm just going to share some imagery here on this board so you can see in one word, those are the statements. We have the majority of people are 15 years plus. So again, I'm sharing these for awareness on this part of the board. That's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to add these in a moment after we've started. So in terms of prioritized themes, let's see what you guys have chosen, you folks have chosen. So 29% want to hear about the dehumanization dilemma. So this is all about abstraction, treating people like numbers. We've got 21% of people wanting what is the industry saying and the history. We've got 14% around human resources itself being oxymoron, and 14% around what are the alternatives. So we're going to start with the dehumanization dilemma. So we are going to land here. Anyone recognize any of these things? What is this thing on the left here?
Project, MS project.
Gantt chart.
It's like a Gantt chart. Henry Gantt, your delightful thing you created for us. A Gantt chart, and even on it, it says resource 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is classic, classic waterfall style delivery and planning. It's how we've learned, or how I learned anyway, to plan people onto projects. It's how we've managed our project delivery life cycle. We've taken a number of things collectively together, and we've tried to understand what scope and timelines we're working to. You can hide collaborative cursors, perhaps, if you like, John, so it's not in people's way. And how many people have heard that delightful phrase that's used all the time by many people in leadership position? Our people are our greatest asset. Feel free to respond in the chat or speak out loud. Is this something you've heard before? Because I certainly have.
All the time.
All the time. So we hear it all the time. We hear this phrase, people are our greatest asset. How often do we comparatively feel that that is backed up by action? Does it feel like it's really what is it an accurate reflection of how companies really think, or is it Is it just lip service? Is it words that people are just saying to make them feel warm and fuzzy inside? Lip service, yeah. And John, classic, it depends again. I'm fully expecting that to be your answer most of the evening, and that's okay. We're also seeing on the right-hand side here, this seems to be a very common response to the situation where, hey, we're running late against our timeline. We're struggling. We're not going to hit the deadline. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw more people at the equation. That's the immediate response people jump to. They think more output or more people equals more output. And again, that seems to be the de facto response. More people equals more output. And what we've learned, and you can see on this visual here, that more people just creates more complexity. So you can see the more lines of people there are, the more complexity is involved, the longer a meeting might go on, the more decision points there might have to be, the harder it is to get everyone together. Charlene, you've shared that great analogy of 9 months to have a baby does not equal 9 people to have a baby in a month. I saw a wonderful image years ago, and it was comparing giving birth across various project management methodologies, including that one. Kanban, we're going to do little parts of babies incrementally here and there. I think it was Scrum was saying we're going to spend a few weeks designing this part of the baby, and then we're going to check afterwards, and we're going to change it. Love that analogy. Anyway, so the default response when we're working with projects and people seems to be more people equals more output, and we've learned that's not necessarily the case. It comes back to that old production line style thinking, that Taylorism, that Fordism, and that's kind of going to be covered as part of the historical side of the human resources side of things. But the problem I find is that when we refer to humans as resources, it just becomes all that much easier to dehumanize them, to think of them as less than, to think of them as a line on a spreadsheet, to think of them as an avatar behind a screen. On my screen right now, I see Thomas Truman. Fortunately, I can see his face. But that's not the same with everyone else. Everyone else isn't necessarily on camera. There are 43 participants today. I can't see everyone. So at the moment, there's lots of people here who are just names on a screen to me. That's a form of abstraction. JR, for example. JR, you are currently just JR on a screen. I can't see who you are, what you're about, and it makes it easier to think of you as less of a person. This is what happens. We have this archaic way of thinking that's just part of business language, part of what we do. It's very entrenched, and often people do it without intending to. And this is the thing, right? So again, a question to you folks. I'll share that Miro link again, Sumana. Give me a second. Or someone show my path. I'm not sure where mine's gone. John, if you could do that, please. Lost my train of thought there. Yes, people do it without intending to. So when I hear someone in a meeting refer to someone as a resource, or they say, hey, I need more resources, my first response is, can I just clarify what it is that you mean? Cue this kind of silent, awkward moment where someone kind of ums and ahs a little bit, and then kind of almost hush in a hushed response, kind of, I mean people. So that response alone tells me that people are almost ashamed of it. They realize they've done it. It's but they haven't intended. They haven't intended to refer to someone as less than. It's just become so normal that everyone does it. And often it's people in management positions that are doing it because they are the people responsible for staffing or resourcing projects. So they do it without thinking. So people are abstracted. They are considered lines on a spreadsheet. It makes it easier to make decisions. It makes it easier to, when it comes to difficult times, to think, we need to reduce our headcount. Who can we get rid of? It makes it easier to those decisions. So you could argue, and John, this might be something that you bring up later, you could argue it's necessary. It can remove emotion from the equation, and it can make it easier to make those difficult decisions, because ultimately we are working in businesses, and businesses have to survive, and therefore sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. And abstracting people into numbers, into lines on a spreadsheet, avatars behind a screen, if you can think of them as less than and just think of them as a resource, then it's easy to just make those decisions. Keen to understand from you folks, you can see at this part of the board, what metrics do we track in the workplace today? Feel free to contribute your thoughts on these post-it notes. Double left click on any of them and you can share any metrics that you track that you're aware of. Feel free to speak out loud, to type in the chat if you prefer to do so. What metrics do we track? All right, so we're seeing utilization, overtime, velocity. We've got a couple referring to happiness. It's the happiness index. Health checks, scorecards, employee satisfaction, a PMO dashboard. So we got, yeah, a couple there relating to health checks again. Focus factor. Don't worry if you accidentally move something. I should have locked most of this down, but it happens. Now, okay, next question. You can see lots of things there. Indulge me if you will. Color these post-it notes green if you think they relate to treating people like people. Which of these do we think are people focused? Okay, so I'm going to delete a couple of duplicates. So we've got employee satisfaction a couple of times. We've got a couple of health checks. The reason I wanted to do this is you can probably quite quickly see most of this is around, or usually a lot of the metrics that are tracked are largely from a standpoint, or they're focused on productivity metrics rather than people. So there are increasingly metrics that are being used, and I'm an advocate for them, of ENPS, employee net promoter scores, of happiness metrics, of team health checks, velocity if it's used for the purpose of measuring a team's capacity so they understand their capacity, not as a comparative tool again for others. A lot of metrics, however, are basically used to monitor productivity and to maximize productivity out of people. And when we go through the historical side of things, we'll begin to learn why that has been, and we can discuss why it's no longer perhaps the best way of doing things. And I've highlighted another quote here at the bottom, another example, an extreme one, I'll grant you that, and I don't mean to compare in any way the situation that arose from this, but Joseph Stalin famously said that a single death is a tragedy, whereas a million is a statistic. So as soon as it becomes more than a few people, we can easily treat people as a statistic. We think of the rise of data science, the wealth of data we have at our disposal nowadays. It can cause this dehumanization, this focus on numbers, and less on people. Right, moving on to the next topic then. So the second highest rated one was the history. Let's go to the history. So we should be landing over here. Does anyone recognize the image in the top left-hand corner?
Is this Ford?
That is Ford. That is the Ford production line, going back early 1900s. So back when a lot of these focuses on management techniques being driven around producing output, maximize as much output as you can, get as much as you can out of workers, and building upon the works of Taylor. It was all about the right way to do things, maximize the outputs out of your available resources, including people. The difference is the industry is using this, and at the time, our economy was focused largely on being product and manufacturing led, as opposed to service led or knowledge worker based like we are today. So we've got this older way of doing things where it was all focused on reproducing waste, all on efficiency and all on productivity. And the consequence of these works was often that these businesses could get more output for fewer people or fewer hours worked. We then have the likes of theory X and theory Y. So we're going to Douglas McGregor, management of people, assuming that if you were a theory X person, you believe that people disliked work, they found it boring, they would have to be coerced to make the right decision or put the right level of effort in. They would rather be directed rather than have their own responsibility and work with self-autonomy or work in that way. They were primarily motivated by money and fears about losing their job. And they didn't believe that people had a lot of creativity unless it came to bending the rules or being lazy. And then we have theory Y, which is a much more modern stance to management, where we have people needing to work. Yes, Laurie, so people needed to be coerced to work. Theory Y, we believe that people want to work, they're interested in it, and under the right conditions, they enjoy it, that we want to be self-directed, we want to seek and accept responsibility. And wherein under the right conditions, we will be able to maximize our own potential, and that we are highly creative creatures, particularly now that we're largely working in this knowledge worker sort of world, or many of us are. We then have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, classic Abraham Maslow and his theory of human motivation. And again, in the bottom part of this pyramid, what you can see is these basic human needs that are, again, for most of us, largely fulfilled, we would hope. We have access to food, water, and security and safety. We have roofs over our heads. And we move into the kind of the upper two tiers where there's psychological needs, being part of community, having relationships, feeling accomplished, with lastly moving towards self-actualization. And then I'm sure many of you are familiar with Daniel Pink, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, something that many agile coaches will talk about. It very much underpins my own work. I alluded back to it earlier. I want to provide an environment systemically where people can do their best work, be the most productive selves. And for me, that is helping them achieve or have autonomy, mastery, and purpose in their work. Having the ability to be self-directed, not necessarily motivated just by money. And there's arguments, there's research suggesting that people are motivated more by a sense of purpose than they are by money. Now, John kindly did some research, and he prompted this a few weeks ago. He was showing that the number of references to the word resources has changed over time. It had a bit of a peak in the mid-1980s, I think, and ever since has been very much on the decline. You can see that here. I've using Google Ngram just snapped the last 30 years or so. It stops in 2019, but then the number of references to the word resources is dropping drastically. Very much so. So less use of the term resources in literature. Now I'm interested to learn, what is it that motivates you about work? And again, share in the chat here, share on the Miro boards. There's lots of post-it notes. You can add your thoughts. What is it that motivates you personally about work? Being done with it. What an answer. A lot of references to purpose, energy from the team, collaborating, mastering, doing good things, belonging, giving people the wings to fly. I like that. So again, I may be preaching to the converted here because it sounds like, having looked at the demographic, we are largely collectively a group of coaches, scrum masters, people that are involved in the agile world and are probably therefore already converted to an extent. But we can see here, us as a group of individuals, we're motivated by things that are less focused on being treated like we're resources. Out of interest, does anyone know where the first HR department is attributed to? Guess not. Okay, so supposedly HR, the first HR department, it wasn't called HR, it was called personnel. It goes back to the National Cash Register in 1901. And their leader at the time, John H. Patterson, was largely at the time focused on compliance, record keeping, workplace safety, wage management, handling employee grievances, as well as training supervisors on new laws and workplace practices. So personnel was one of the forerunners for what became HR departments. So there's a little bit about the history. let's go on to human resources, the oxymoron. So this is all about the language of the words themselves. So human and resources, is that itself not an oxymoron? When we think about the word human is described as of or relating to the characteristics of humankind, and resources meaning a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. So those two words themselves, they do seem a bit at odds with one another. One's about things, one's about people. Now, a question for you. What do you think when you hear the term resources? What do you think of? What types of resources do you think of? Again, share in the chat, speak out loud, engage in whichever way you should so wish. Time, yes, time. Natural resources, yeah.
I think of any kind of technical needs, like a computer, like a, access to AWS or database or something like that.
Yeah, so we got bits of tin, we've got servers, we've got computers, we've got laptops, we've got chairs, mice, commodities. Someone says finance and people, money, yeah, pens, consumables, desks. Knowledge is a resource. Okay, so I'm just going to share a couple of examples of things that I've noted down here as resources. So similar to things you said, servers, we've got oil, natural resource, gas, energy, time, coffee, a resource, money, pens, printers, electronics, lots of examples of types of resources. Now, what are the traits of a person? And what are the traits of a resource? Share your thoughts. Should be here. So what are the traits of people? They have emotions. They're always good for a surprise. They have feelings. They have empathy. They have thinking ability. They have compassion. They are kind and authentic, self-aware. What about traits of resource? We've got data. You can choose to spend it. It's something replaceable, consumable. It enables you to do something. It's disposable. Yeah, easy to replace. Okay, so I'll share with you some of my thoughts on this then. So humans, or people, are complex and diverse. They have individual needs. The outputs between them may differ. One software developer may not produce the same amount of outputs as another software developer, and that's okay. They're driven by purpose. You folks highlighted that very well a moment ago when we asked what motivated you. Many of you said things around purpose. They are mutable. They can change. They are collaborative and they have high potential. But what about resources? Well, they're disposable. Someone said that. They're replaceable. Same. They tend to have the same output. Obviously there are variations. A laptop with X processing power may be able to produce better results than another. But a common example would be a single unit of coal. Let's say a pound of coal will only produce X amount of energy if you're using it in that way. Resources are commodities. They are a means to an end. They are inanimate and they are immutable. They don't tend to change. And yes, another example of a person is they can get tired, burnt out, sad, or exhausted, unfortunately so. Is anyone familiar with the Pygmalion Effect? Yeah? No? Someone, John shaking his head?
No.
Well, it's also called the Rosenthal Effect. All right. I must have not locked that part. I thought I had. How have you moved that? It says it's locked. It's strange. Anyway, so the Pygmalion Effect or the Rosenthal, I've just hidden it now. Foolish. The Pygmalion Effect, the Rosenthal Effect, named after the ancient Greek king. It's a Greek myth. Ancient Greek king Pygmalion, who famously was a sculptor, sculpted a beautiful woman and fell in love with this woman. And he prayed to Athena, who turned this sculpture into a real person for him. So it's all around the self-fulfilling prophecy. He loved this thing so much it came true, it came to life. And the Pygmalion effect, or the Rosenthal effect, is around the belief that if you manage people in a certain way, they will respond accordingly. So if you are in the workplace and you treat someone as if they're a resource, they may begin to behave like they're a resource. If you limit their potential by managing them within certain parameters and boundaries, they may act accordingly. And you can see the circle here. It says our actions towards ourselves and others are impacted by others' beliefs about us. So a manager's belief that we can achieve X then causes our actions again towards us and ourselves and our beliefs and so on. So it ends up being the circle. So if we are going out there referring to people as resources on a daily basis, someone wakes up and they hear from the CEO of their company, oh, we need more resources next year. Our people are our assets, but meaning resources when they say it. The problem with that is then they may begin to behave accordingly. They'll start to think of themselves as resources. I'm a resource to a company. I'm a cog in a corporate machine. I'm going to act accordingly. I'm going to be disengaged, and I'm just going to do that. I won't go above and beyond. And there's a great agile game I always use to highlight the difference between outputs and outcomes. And to me, it's a similar sort of thing. It can demonstrate very quickly the Pygmalion effect. And if we had time, I would play with you folks now. But the way it works is it's called a beautiful summer meadow. And you can vary that into many different forms. I've done it as a festive Christmas scene, a spooky Halloween scene, and so on and so forth. You can seasonalize it, you can turn it into anything you wish. But essentially, you make a game, and it's a very quick one. You get two groups of people, and with one of them, you give them this very detail-oriented brief. You must design this beautiful summer meadow, but it's got to have a sun in the top right-hand corner with 3 sunbeams. It's got to have 7 red flowers with 3 blue leaves. It's got to have 4 cows that have got black spots, 2 black spots, and so on and so forth. You make it really, really detail-oriented. And you give them that, and you give them 2 minutes to draw it together without speaking, and off they go. And you give the same brief, a different team, a different brief that just says, create a beautiful summer meadow with a sun in the sky, some cows, some flowers in a field. The consequence of that game, 99% of the times I've run that, is that people focus so much so on the detail that they forget what the actual intent was, a beautiful summer meadow. So they lose the bigger picture, the outcome, and it stifles creativity. Whereas on the flip side, the people that are given the outcome focused brief, they produce things that weren't even there. The beautiful sun meadow didn't have any mention to anything beyond cows and flowers and things, but they just went with their creativity and they created things that they envisaged seeing in a meadow. So it opened up creativity. And again, that to me was a great example of how if you limit the boundaries of what people can do, the consequences is they will produce, or they can produce less results. They can behave exactly as you treat them. So the Pygmalion effect, again, something I'm a huge believer in, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier. Create an environment where people can be their best selves, the most productive selves on their best day, and be supported on their worst day. Treat them give them autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Give them those things. Don't treat them like resources. Treat them like people. Those people with potential, limitless potential. They are different people. And the problem as well is, as we saw a moment ago, you say resource. Let's say we're all in a meeting together and someone says, oh, I need more resources. Immediately, okay, well, that could mean pens, paper, gas. Well, it depends on your context matters, but it could mean many things. So immediately it's vague. If they meant people, just say people. If you needed a capability, just say you need that. We are short on Java developers. We could do with more people to help us with that. Immediately we use resources. It's a vagary. You have to then ask what it means, and then it becomes awkward. And again, coming back to what I was saying earlier, most people aren't using it with malicious intent. It's not being done to be hurtful, to frustrate or annoy. It's just so ingrained, they do it without meaning to. And the challenge is that without anyone suggesting otherwise, that will always remain the same. In the same way I do when I talk about retrospectives. If you are aware of something that's happening, but you're not doing anything to change it, that is you as a team deciding that you accept that. You're accepting that as your reality, and you're aware it won't change, and that is your decision, and that's fine. If that's your decision, go for it. But if you're aware of something happening that you know could change or could be different, and you continue to reinforce that behavior, odds are you'll be complaining about it in a few weeks' time anyway. Same with retrospectives. I've referenced here Admiral Grace Hopper, who said to the Pentagon in 1983, "You manage things, you lead people." So resources, and we're talking about the sort of resources we were talking about a moment ago: pens, paper, chairs, laptops, servers, software licenses, inanimate, immutable things. Those are the things that we manage, but it's people that we lead. I'd love to leave you guys with that as a focus point before we move on to the next area. So what are the alternatives, folks? What else is out there?
There's a comment here.
Yes.
A question. I want to ask a question as well, but I don't want to interrupt.
Go for it. Go for it. No,
I see, Sarah, you've got a comment and a question. May I disagree?
Yeah, so I love my company and I love the people at our company, and we're very supportive of people. And I think we probably do consider our developers as resources, but they are our most precious resource. And we can't guarantee the output that they're going to have, and we're very aware of that. We measure velocity, but the only place it's ever used is during sprint planning to make sure that they're not overwhelmed. And we almost spend their time wisely, because we know that there's a finite amount of it, and there's only so amount of creativity and what have you. And we had an app that we wanted to get out. It was really difficult, and we just had a really frank conversation with them to say, can we do anything to help? And it wasn't us saying we'll throw more people at you. It wasn't us saying, oh, you're going on this course, you're doing this thing. It was genuinely saying, you are a team. This is your sort of job. This is what you're trying to achieve. What can we do? Would more people help? But the question was, do you want any more resource? But it was a very open question. I think it included those people as people, but anything else as well.
I think the distinction here that's really important to make is that you've led with more servant leadership rather than just get it done, or we'll give you this, just tell us what you need and we'll do it. You've led with, how can we support you? How can we help? How can we make this happen? We are aware there is a finite amount of time, and it's not that you've tried to get them to work longer hours or treat them as less than. You've treated them as people. You're just asking, is there anything else that we could provide you with? And the use of the word resource there may not have been used in the context that we're talking about today.
I noticed Noel had some questions as well, and Sarah's responded 37.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't know exactly but they don't work overtime. We never ask for overtime. If they give overtime, it's a gift, and we would never ask for it. And if people were doing that, then we would say, don't. Make sure you take your lunch break, finish on time. Don't take work home with you. It's really important for them to have some downtime.
Wow. I'm just seeing some numbers in the channel about the amount of hours people in America work as well. That's incredible. Sorry, Sarah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when we hear the differences between our kind of European and US counterparts, where we hear of the expected hours of working, the number of holiday days comparatively, and things like that. I can appreciate there is this unspoken expectation that people work long hours, and they've got the side hustle sort of culture going on there. It must be very difficult. I as a European, at least, am fortunate to be in that sort of environment where we do have, I guess, a greater focus on a better balance between work and life. There was a point here made about, what if there's a scenario where a person themselves, who isn't management, is referring to themselves as a resource? My answer to this, like I would be with anything, that it's never a one-size-fits-all situation. Context always matters. So if you have a situation where a person is happy to be referred to as a resource, fine. Don't change that. If that different people are motivated by different things. We've already highlighted this. So perhaps that motivates them, that's okay. But the challenge is in my experience, it's more on the realms. I did some rudimentary polling before LinkedIn polls became a blasphemous thing in the past few months, because everyone's overusing them. But last year, when I first started talking about this topic, I did some polling, and it was more on the realms of 80% were supportive of altering the term resources to mean people, with 20% disagreeing. And again, that's okay. If you are someone who doesn't mind it, fine. I don't think anyone's forcing you otherwise. But if there is a large enough group of people who aren't motivated by it, who don't like the term, don't like being referred to in that way, then why continue to do so? Human language evolves. There are plenty of words that we no longer use that I wish we used. I wake up after a heavy weekend drinking and I'd love to say to my friends, hey, I feel crapulous to me. I overdrank and I overate. We don't use that anymore. There's plenty of words that aren't used, and just human language evolves.
So I'm noticing lots of comments in the chat and questions. So Sarah, did you have a further point to make before we move on? Was there anything else you wanted to say? I thought I saw something.
No, I don't think so. I think Mike had a question for me and I don't think he's written it yet.
Yeah, there's something from Mike and Noel and Mark. And I know, Mike, you've got your hand up. Mike, do you want to go, man?
Mr. Levings, go for it.
So thank you. And thank you for your response, Sarah. I really had 3 things to say, and they come as questions, but in response to what you said, are the people and teams valued in the organization? Are they valued beyond their value just to the organization? So I think human beings should be treated with respect beyond just the value that they add to an organization. And have they ever been asked whether they object to being, not necessarily in your organization, but should teams be asked whether they should be referred to as resources? And if not, what would their preferential term be? But I think, if you take it back to the people and ask them what they think and what they want, I think that's better engagement.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that was the point. They were asked what they wanted. So yes, the term resource was used. I think actually if we did ask people, do you mind being referred to as resources, or is there a better word? I think that would be a really good idea.
I don't think that's often done. And if we think that the majority of departments in a business that are relating to the experience an employee has is called HR, human resources. So it's entrenched even to the very fabric of companies. Human resources is HR. It reinforces this language, this behavior. And I don't believe that many companies do go out there and say, hey, what would you like to be referred to? Does human resources work for you? Now, there are some alternatives that I'll be sharing with you in a moment when we move on to that area. So there are other companies out there that are pioneering different terms for how they refer to people, and we can cover some of those. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. It may be that some people prefer to be referred to as certain terms and others don't. Just doesn't resonate. There is an activity we're going to do in a moment where we look at some of the worst examples of people being referred to as something.
Can I make 2 points, Chris? I mainly agree with you. I totally agree with you. But my points, so I used to say the resources thing, and I always jump in meetings. I had some horrific times in the past where someone said on a call and then they generate the code, and me and a friend said, well, what was about? Ask them. So as we give it to the developers, and they'd actually turned it into a process. So I've always fought the people resources thing and stood up and said, oh no, people. But I've softened recently because I think you need to take it to the client, and I do that more now. If someone's mental model is people are resources, telling them they're people won't help them. It doesn't help get through it. You need to be softer in my mind. I think you need to, so I don't go up at it straight away and say, no, people, because that doesn't help. If people are resources for the person, then why are people resources for that person? What's in the system? What's the thing behind the thing that's causing it? It's more interesting. What's causing the thing? And that the effect, the circle, what's the culture that's driving that? And then my other point is sometimes people are resources and it's not cool and it's not nice. And I would never want to be in that or want anyone be in that position. But in highly automated environments where people are treated like resources because they don't want people to think, they want them just to be autonomous and follow a set of steps. And in that, we're not talking knowledge working, we're talking, it is dehumanized and it is resource and it is just following the steps. But that's not knowledge work. And if people are thinking knowledge work should be that, they're barking up the wrong tree. But those are my 2 points. Take it to the client, and very occasionally people sometimes are resources. Those are my 2 points I'd like to make at this point.
And I build on what you've said there. Basically, my response, and again, it'll come towards the end. Kind of what next? What do I recommend? it's always deal with empathy first, right? If someone's referring to someone's resource, there's a reason they're doing that. And if you begin with unconditional positive regard for that person first and think, right, they're not doing it to piss people off, they're not doing it to offend or anything, they're doing it, odds are, because that's what they've learned is acceptable language. It's what they believe is right to be done, and then they're probably not even aware that it's maybe offensive to some people or dehumanizes or removes a sense of purpose from them. So approach it with empathy and unconditional positive regard, understand their rationale, their reasons for thinking of it that way, and then approach accordingly. Don't go in it with all guns blazing and accuse someone saying, oh, you've just said people, you're a bad person. But perhaps let that person know privately that there is a lot of people who are concerned by that language. Maybe we could think about using something else.
I know we're running slow on time. I noticed Noel has a question he wanted to ask earlier. So can we just maybe, Noel, you got a question, man?
Hi, I'm female, and yes, my name is British.
Sorry, Noel.
It's quite okay. Everyone does it. Don't call me Noel though. It's Noel.
Okay, no. Okay,
right.
cool. No,
so
good.
I have two friends, totally opposite people, and I asked, and I've heard this a lot from people, so I decided I'm going to ask two friends who are different. One's very conventional, has been at a bank for that's her career, and then I have a friend who is an entrepreneur, and I asked them, do you think employees are lazy? And they both said yes. And I don't believe that. I believe there's a reason, and it's how companies, corporations treat people. And until people are treated better, it goes back to what you're saying, is that they're going to act like resources. And I've been in this situation where I was completely empowered. I was a scrum master. They changed my job, and then I was micromanaged. And I'm like, this is what you're going to get from me then. Like, you're totally transactional. And when I started, it was very relational. So it's all I can say is that's the experience I've had. And I'm guessing is that the experience a lot of people have when they're not valued.
It completely happens. I've been there as well. Similar situation. Had a manager who micromanaged, and it took away a sense of autonomy and ability to be creative about things. And immediately got my backup, and my response was, well, okay, if that's the way I'm going to be treated, then that's how I'm going to behave, right? If that's what I've got to do to play ball, because otherwise, because there are lots of factors that go into it, right? If you don't toe the line to an extent with a manager, that can affect your performance appraisal and all sorts of things in your career progression. And there can be lots of concerns about that. It can just make things very difficult from a professional relationship perspective. So there's lots of friction that those sorts of scenarios can cause. And sometimes the path of least resistance there is to go, fine, okay, I'll behave like a resource if that's what you're trying to get from me. But it will mean that next time an opportunity arises for me to find or do something elsewhere, I'm probably going to be open to that opportunity. Whereas beforehand, I might have been, getting rid of that opportunity or saying I'm not interested. Conscious of time, I just want to move us towards a couple of alternatives then. There is maybe 10 minutes left. So what else is out there? Well, you've got companies, notable examples such as Facebook, they call it people at. Airbnb, employee experiences. Google is people operations. Monzo, people team. And Salesforce, employee success. They are not the only examples of companies that are rebranding HR. And I wouldn't say I resonate with every single one of those examples. There's lots of roles out there, so the roles are evolving too. So you've now got things like a chief people officer, head of people, a chief happiness officer, which I think is just delightful. You've got director of employee engagement, and with the notes or the research from Gallup and otherwise suggesting that more engaged employees are more productive. Having an engagement officer and having a focus on employee engagement seems to be beneficial. You've got a people champion. Who doesn't love a good champion? You've got a purpose officer rather than just an HR person, and then a people and capabilities director. So there are alternatives that are happening out there in some very large companies. Now, notably, these large companies are the more modern tech companies, which is interesting. Tends to be younger demographics, tends to perhaps be unburdened by some of the historical hierarchical structures that maybe the older companies that have got deeply entrenched HR and so on and so forth. So there could be a link to the fact that some of these companies are more modern and techy. I'm keen to hear very quickly, and just call out in the chat, or you can type in the mirror, but what's some of the worst examples of terms for HR that you've heard of?
Engagement officers.
Engagement officers. Sounds like someone arranging or involved in marriage.
A talent acquisition.
Talent acquisition.
Oh God, yes, that's awful.
All right.
It is all over Atlanta IT Tech. That's all they use.
Human capital. That's one I've heard. Human capital. We've got talent management, which makes it sound like perhaps the Hollywoods or something like that. Talent agency. So there are some interesting ones out there. I've also heard partner being used. Waitrose in the UK, John Lewis, they refer to people as partners, suggesting everyone's in it together. Timpsons, I wasn't aware of this. So Timpsons, they've removed HR. What are they calling them, John?
I'm trying to look it up at the moment, but I know that 30% of all Timpson staff, they recruit directly in prisons, but they don't like the term HR. But I'm just trying to find it now.
What about
it's brilliant at supporting ex-prisoners.
What about the feel-good manager?
The field of?
A feel-good manager.
A feel-good manager.
A feel-good manager.
Feel-good manager.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think at Waitrose, they are genuinely partners in the sort of sense that they own a stake in the company. Same as John Lewis, it's a partnership.
Yep, I do indeed. All right, conscious of time, let's just think about what's next then. So what I'm very aware of, and it's the same thing I mentioned whenever I'm talking about retrospectives as well, a little less conversation, a little more action. So there's lots of people talking about changing terms like resources. There's lots of people suggesting we should do something, but there's not enough actual action to change things. So here's a nice little flow diagram. Should I say resources? Do you mean people? Yes. Okay, say people. Do you mean things and things? Do you mean people and things? Then yes, say people and the things. No. Do you mean things? Then yes, say things. It's really simple. My encouragement to you is if you hear people referring to someone as a resource, then just mention it, encourage them to consider otherwise, right? If we want to, if we really want to be people first, if we really want to treat people like they are people, like this limitless potential, people that have lots of creative boundaries, knowledge workers, if we want to treat them accordingly, then we need to encourage others to do so also. So if you hear it, call it out, right? Otherwise, it will stay the same. Same as I was saying earlier. If you don't do anything about it, it won't change. But I've mentioned here again, it's the same point I made to John earlier, do so with empathy. So it doesn't need to be an accusation. It doesn't need to be blame. Approach them with empathy, help them understand perhaps the alternatives, why it is that they're considering a person a resource, and go from there. If you yourself need a capability or skill set, ask for that capability or skill set. Don't be vague about it. Say you need a Java developer. Say you need someone with Angular skills. Say you're missing a capability. It doesn't need to be that you're missing a resource. If you are the ability to influence change, you're senior enough to perhaps work with HR, maybe ask them to consider how they refer to people as well, right? So there are companies out there, Monzo being an example. Monzo Bank, they have explicitly said they no longer refer to people as resources. They believe it's business speak, it's a catch-all term for things you need to do to get things done, but they've never met a person that's a resource. People are just people, and they don't like to be thought of as that. It's very imprecise, and they tell everyone from day one that they encourage their Monzonauts, so they've got their own cultish language to refer to themselves, but they have their Monzonauts to be thought of as people, and if they hear it, they encourage people to call it out. So you can build it into your onboarding processes, you can build it into your ways of working. What else do we have? I often, myself, as a reminder, I use a totem, right? So if anyone's seen the film Inception, they use this little thing, this physical thing they can hold that reminds them that they're real, they're not in the dream world. And for me, it's on the floor, it's fallen off. I have a baby Groot because I have a team of people called the Guardians of Agility. And we are people first is our motto, right? So I lead a transformation group of people that are trying to ensure that we think of people as people. So I have a physical totem on my desk, and I also have googly eyes right between my webcam to remind myself that I'm speaking to people, not just avatars behind a screen. So you can do these little tricks as well. I am Groot, we are Groot, and be part of the change. That's my encouragement to you. Just if you would like to help, then try and do something about it. And the image here is one from James Clear's book, The Power of Small Gains. If we are 1% better at things every day, we achieve great results in just a matter of days. So if we can just make, and it's the same when it comes to retrospective, it's the same when it comes to any change we're making in any company. Taking imperfect action is better than no action. Do small changes, think big, act small, learn fast, or learn often. I am conscious of time. We are at the end. If you have not connected with me, then feel free to do so. I have a website filled with all sorts of free materials, resources, templates on all things agility, largely retrospectives, largely virtual facilitation. I've got my LinkedIn as well, and I've got a YouTube channel with a podcast and all sorts, so feel free to jump on there. Nothing's behind the paywall, do not worry. If you jump back onto the Menti link we said at the start, there is a final question which says, how do you feel now about that opening statement, humans being resources? And I can see we've already got some answers. So intrigued, someone felt the same, someone felt yet to discover, still connected to it. COVID cures humans is it's an important reflection, but I'm not sure how it refers to the statement. And last of all, if you will indulge me, I have built in a mini feedback loop into this talk as well. So if you have any thoughts about what you liked about this talk, what you'd like to see more from the talk, or why not try something, then you have the ability to influence and allow me to inspect and adapt on how I run this talk also. All feedback welcome, even if it's awful. I have very thick skin, don't worry. People support, John. Thank you. People support for Timpsons. As you can probably gather, guys, I could speak to this topic for hours. I've just kind of done a very compressed version of it. And but I love the opportunity to engage and talk with people about these sorts of things. And I'm fully aware that my view on things may be very staunch, but I'm always welcome to hear from others and argue otherwise, or discuss otherwise, and debate otherwise. We don't debate enough.
Thank you, Chris. It looks like the majority of our audience is in the really liked this pile. So it was so engaging.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you, Chris. That's awesome. Really cool. Thank you.
I will check out Humanocracy. Thank you, Noel. Gunther Verhalen is also very much an advocate of being people-focused and humanizing the workplace, if anyone is familiar with his work.
Cool. So we got lots of comments coming in. It's awesome.
Thank you for everyone who engaged, spoke out, shared their thoughts, asked questions. It's always welcome.
If anyone is quite interested in this, I came across something a while ago, which is called, I'll pronounce it wrong, Ikigai. It's a Japanese idea, and it's trying to work out if you've got all of the things that you need in life, then you'll be happy, you will achieve it. And it's what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. So if you can do a job that you can be paid for, and it's what you love doing, and the world needs it, and you're good at it, then you will achieve great things.
So I recently reflected on that exact model, and I was positioning myself where I felt I was. And it was only the does the world need it part that I was like, I'm not really sure. Does the world need me doing what I'm doing? The rest of the parts, I know I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I can be paid for it, so on and so forth. I sit quite well in that model, but the other part I was like, not sure.
Cool. Thank you, Chris.
The link to the game, I have a free copy of that game available on my website. Let me share a link to it. And you can download that. You can run it in Miro. It's called the Outcomes versus Outcomes game, A Beautiful Summer Meadow.
Cool. If folks want to maybe do a cheesy photo, do you want to do that, Chris, or not?
Why not?
Why not?
I'm all for some cheese.
If folks want to force cheesy photo, turn your camera off. If you don't, we will edit you and you will not exist. Just don't turn your camera on, and that's fine. So if you want to put your camera on, that's fine, and I'll count you down from, I don't know, some obtuse number. Let's do 4.5, maybe. I don't know. 4.5.
Becca,
3.
did you get your date with Craig David? Is my question.
4.5.
Still working on that one.
3, 2, 1. Cheese.
Cheese.
Cheesy photo. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for your really interesting talk and workshop, bouncing around this, fascinating subject, not even speaking properly today. Yeah, we're back on Monday, the 23rd of August for Contracting for Change, an ethical approach. We'll get the event up on the website soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. See you. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks.